My fingers trembled around the fourth espresso cup of the morning, caffeine coursing through my veins like liquid desperation. The blank manuscript page on my laptop screen mocked me, cursor blinking with the rhythm of my doom. 3 weeks until my publishing deadline, and I had nothing but coffee stains and crumpled napkins to show for it. The Great Chesapeake Novel. That's what my editor called it. What a joke. I couldn't even write a grocery list without second-guessing every word choice. Another refill, Kira? Sarah, the barista, knew my addiction better than my therapist. I think I'll die first, I muttered, pushing the cup away. That's when I saw it. A bright yellow flyer taped to the bulletin board next to organic produce. Ads and yoga classes, Chesapeake Bay Cycling Club, weekend century ride, 100 miles of Virginia countryside. All skill levels welcome. 100 miles. The distance between my current pathetic existence and something resembling sanity. I signed up before my rational mind could intervene. 2 days later, I stood in Revolution Cycle Shop, surrounded by gear that looked designed for NASA missions. The owner, Mike, adjusted my rental bike with the patience of someone who dealt with plenty of cycling virgins. You sure about the century ride? Maybe start with a 20-miler? I need the punishment, I said, testing the shifters. That laugh made me look up. Rich, unguarded, completely genuine. She stood near the wheel display, blonde hair catching afternoon sunlight streaming through the shop windows. Blue eyes crinkled with amusement as she overheard my masochistic cycling plans. Professional camera equipment hung around her neck like expensive jewelry, and her bike looked like it cost more than my car. First century ride? She asked, approaching with athletic confidence. First ride, period. The admission embarrassed me, but her smile made honesty feel safe. Adeline Foster. She extended a hand, calloused from outdoor work. I specialize in documenting people's poor life decisions. Kira Bryant. I specialize in making them. Mike rolled his eyes. Adeline's our club photographer. She'll capture your inevitable breakdown around mile 60. Hey, I also provide excellent mechanical support, she protested, then turned to me. What's driving this sudden cycling urge? Midlife crisis? Writer's block? Terminal case? Her expression shifted, genuine interest replacing casual friendliness. What kind of writing? Novels? Well, one novel, theoretically. I gestured at my laptop bag. Currently, it's more like an expensive typewriter for ordering coffee. I know that feeling, except with cameras and creative drought. Something sparked between us, recognition of shared artistic struggle. Mike finished the bike adjustments, but neither of us moved to leave. Same time Saturday then? She asked. Unless common sense kicks in. Hope it doesn't. The way she said it, looking directly into my eyes, made my pulse quicken in ways that had nothing to do with caffeine. Dawn painted the Chesapeake Bay Bridge in rose gold as 20 cyclists gathered at the parking area. My legs felt like overcooked spaghetti, and I hadn't even started pedaling yet. The coffee withdrawal headache pounded behind my eyes despite 3 emergency shots of espresso. Adeline appeared beside me, camera already capturing the sunrise. Her cycling outfit revealed toned muscles that spoke of serious training, making my bargain bin gear look even more pathetic. Ready for your beautiful suffering? She asked, adjusting her helmet. Define ready. The group leader, a weathered man named Tom, shouted instructions about pace lines and hand signals. I understood maybe half of it. Adeline leaned closer, her voice warm against my ear. Stick with me. I'll translate cycling speak. We rolled out as the sun crested the horizon, 20 bikes streaming across the bridge in formation. The morning air carried salt and promise, and for the first few miles I actually felt capable. Tell me about this novel, Adeline said, pulling up beside me as we settled into rhythm. 3 women, different generations, connected by a house they all lived in. The words came easier while pedaling, like movement unlocked my creative flow. But I can't figure out their relationships, how they influence each other. What draws them to this house? That's the problem. I know the ending but not the journey. She raised her camera one-handed, snapping photos of the peloton ahead. Sometimes the journey reveals itself through the people we meet along the way. Her words carried weight beyond cycling philosophy. I found myself studying her profile, the concentrated way she framed shots while maintaining perfect bike handling. What about your photography? Travel work pays well? Magazine assignments, some commercial stuff. But I'm documenting disappearing Virginia landscapes for a book project. She gestured toward marshlands stretching beyond the road. Developments swallowing everything. Mile 20 brought our first mechanical crisis. Adeline's rear tire went flat with a sharp hiss, forcing us to pull over while the main group continued ahead. Damn timing, she muttered, flipping her bike upside down. I'll wait. Solidarity in suffering. You don't have to. I want to. Something shifted in her expression, surprise mixing with gratitude. We worked together, her hands guiding mine through tire-changing basics. The intimacy of shared problem-solving created unexpected electricity between us. There's a trick to seating the tube, she said, positioning behind me. Her hands covered mine, directing the motion. Feel that? I felt everything. Her breath on my neck, the warmth radiating from her body, the competent strength in her fingers. This wasn't just mechanical instruction. Perfect, she whispered. We remounted and chased the group, pushing harder to make up time. The increased pace forced conversation into breathing space, but comfortable silence settled between us. She'd point out interesting shots. I'd share observations that might become story elements. Mile 40 brought the second crisis. My chain dropped, jamming between frame and crankset with mechanical finality. This is why I stick to keyboards, I said, examining the greasy mess. Adeline laughed, producing tools from her seat pack like a cycling magician. Writers and photographers were both documenting truth. Just different tools. She worked efficiently, grease-stained fingers coaxing my chain back into position. I watched her concentrate, noting the small scar above her left eyebrow, the way she bit her lip when focused. Almost got it. She looked up, catching me staring. What? Nothing. Just thinking. About your novel? About how some people make everything look effortless. The compliment hung between us, loaded with meaning beyond bike repair. She held my gaze longer than necessary, and I felt that spark again, stronger now. There. She stood, wiping hands on a rag. Ready to finish this thing? The remaining miles passed in comfortable partnership, matching pace and rhythm like we'd been riding together for years. When the parking area finally appeared, exhaustion mixed with unexpected disappointment. Congratulations, she said as we coasted to a stop. Official Century Survivor. Thanks to my mechanical support crew. Buy you coffee? Real coffee, not energy gel caffeine? The invitation felt significant, a bridge between cycling acquaintance and something deeper. I know just the place. Welcome to my cave, Adeline said, pushing open the heavy door to her studio space downtown. The scent hit me immediately. Chemicals, coffee, and something indefinably creative. Red light bathed everything in warmth as she led me through the main room toward a smaller space lined with enlargers and developing tanks. Black and white photographs hung on wire lines like captured dreams. This is where the magic happens, she said, switching on the safe light. Want to see our ride develop? I watched her work, hands moving with practiced precision through chemical baths. The images emerged slowly, ghost-like at first, then gaining definition. There I was, bent over my broken chain, completely absorbed. There she was, capturing sunrise shots while maintaining perfect form. You made me look competent, I said, studying the print. I captured what was there. Her shoulder brushed mine as she reached for the fixer solution, close enough that I caught. Her scent beneath the chemistry, something clean and outdoorsy that made my pulse quicken. Tell me more about this book project, I said, desperate to distract myself from the intimacy of the red-lit space. She pulled down other prints, landscapes of Virginia's shoreline, old barns, disappearing farmland. Each image told stories of time and change that my writer's brain immediately wanted to translate into words. It's about impermanence, she said softly, how everything beautiful eventually fades. Not everything. The comment slipped out before I could stop it. She looked at me then, really looked, and the air between us shifted. We were standing too close for casual conversation, but neither of us moved away. Some things get better with time, she whispered. Coffee became our Tuesday ritual. I'd arrive at Grind Coffee with my laptop, she'd appear with contact sheets in a loop. We created a corner table partnership, my words developing alongside her images. "Read me something," she said during our third week, settling into the chair across from me. "It's rough. First draft rough." "Try me." I cleared my throat, suddenly nervous. Sarah pressed her palm against the kitchen window, watching rain blur the garden into impressionist colors. The house held 3 generations of women's secrets, but none of them had prepared her for this moment of choice. Adeline's eyes never left my face as I read, her attention complete and unwavering, in ways that made me feel simultaneously exposed and cherished. "That's beautiful," she said when I finished. "The house as keeper of secrets. You think the metaphor works? I think you understand how places hold emotion." Her praise felt like sunlight after winter, warming parts of me I'd forgotten existed. We talked about narrative structure and visual composition, finding parallels between our creative processes that neither of us expected. "Photography and writing," she mused, stirring her coffee. "We're both trying to stop time. Or understand it better. Same thing, maybe." The rain that started during our Tuesday coffee session had intensified by evening, turning Chesapeake streets into rivers. Adeline accepted my invitation to wait out the storm at my apartment without hesitation, and we ran laughing through puddles like teenagers. "Wine?" I offered, shaking raindrops from my hair. "Please." My living room felt different with her in it, more alive somehow. She wandered to my bookshelves, wineglass in hand, studying titles like they revealed crucial information about my character. "Lot of female authors," she observed. "I like women who tell hard truths." Something in my tone made her turn. We were 6 feet apart, rain drumming against windows, wine warming our systems. The moment balanced on a knife's edge. "What hard truths are you telling?" she asked. I set down my glass, heart hammering. "That I haven't been able to concentrate on writing since I met you." The confession hung between us like a bridge neither of us was sure how to cross. Adeline studied my face, her photographer's eye reading details I couldn't hide. "Is that a problem?" she asked softly. "I don't know yet." She moved closer, closing half the distance. "What do you know?" "That this feels different, dangerous, important. All the best things are." When she kissed me, it was tentative at first, a question rather than a statement. I answered by deepening the contact, tasting wine and possibility on her lips. Her hands found my face, fingers threading through still damp hair, as weeks of circling attraction finally found its center. We broke apart breathing hard, foreheads touching in the lamplight. "This changes things," I whispered. "Everything worthwhile does." Thunder rolled across the bay outside, but inside my apartment, everything felt perfectly still and charged with potential. Saturday mornings transformed into photography expeditions across Chesapeake's hidden corners. Adeline's eye for composition opened my writer's brain to new ways of seeing landscape and light. We'd load her Jeep with camera gear and coffee, then disappear into Virginia's back roads like creative fugitives. "Stop here," she said, pulling over near a weathered tobacco barn surrounded by golden fields. I watched her work, studying how she moved through space, calculating angles and waiting for perfect light. Her intensity reminded me of my own writing process, that complete absorption when everything else fades away. "What do you see?" I asked, settling beside her with my notebook. Time layered on time. That barn's seen 80 years of seasons, storms, harvests. She adjusted her lens. "The wood grain tells stories." I started writing, letting her visual awareness translate into words. The barn became a character in my emerging story, witness to generations of women making difficult choices within its weathered walls. "Your novel's changing," she observed during lunch at a roadside diner. "How can you tell?" "The way you describe things now. More visual depth." She was right. My writing had gained texture, informed by weeks of seeing the world through her creative lens. The 3 women in my story were becoming more real, their connections to place more vivid. "You're changing too," I said. "Your photos have more narrative lately." Her smile carried secrets. "Maybe we're rubbing off on each other." The cycling club noticed our partnership immediately. Tom's knowing grins during group rides, Sarah's meaningful looks when we arrived together at coffee stops. Their teasing felt simultaneously awkward and validating. "You two are inseparable," Mike commented after a particularly successful 40-mile loop. Good riding partners, Adeline replied casually, but her hand found mine as we walked to the cars. Right, he said with a laugh. Partners. The word carried weight. We weren't ready to examine publicly, but privately, in the space. Between her apartment and mine, partnership deepened into something more profound. Our relationship found rhythm in shared creative obsessions. Tuesday coffee dates became Wednesday darkroom sessions became Thursday manuscript. Reviews became weekend adventures that stretched longer and felt more essential. I want to show you something special, she said one Friday evening, loading camera equipment with unusual care. Great dismal swamps stretched endlessly into twilight, ancient cypresses rising from dark water like cathedral pillars. Adeline had discovered a hidden access point where photographers could capture the swamp's mysterious beauty without crowds or restrictions. It's perfect, I breathed, watching light filter through Spanish moss. She worked quickly, catching golden hour magic that transformed the landscape into something otherworldly. I documented everything in my notebook, storing details for future writing. But mostly I watched her move through her element with athletic grace. Got it, she said finally, lowering her camera as darkness settled around us. We were alone in prehistoric silence, connected to something timeless and wild, the intimacy of shared creative triumph mixed with physical attraction that had been building for weeks. Kira, she said softly, stepping closer. I met her halfway, wine from dinner still warm in our systems, surrounded by ancient beauty that made everything feel possible. Her kiss tasted like adventure and certainty combined, and I lost myself in the sensation of her hands finding familiar places on my body. Later, tangled together on blankets in her Jeep under star-filled sky, we talked in whispers about creative obsession and the courage required for authentic living. I haven't felt this inspired in years, she murmured against my shoulder. Writing or otherwise? Both. Everything. I traced patterns on her skin, marveling at how natural this felt. How perfectly we fit together both creatively and physically. The swamp around us hummed with life, and I understood why she'd brought me here, not just for photographs, but for this moment of complete connection. What happens now? I asked. Now we see what develops. The photography metaphor made me laugh, and she joined in, our voices mixing with cricket song and gentle water sounds. My novel was finally finding its voice, her book project gaining emotional depth. And between us, something beautiful was emerging from the creative darkness. I love you, slipped out before I could stop it. She went very still, then lifted her head to look at me in starlight. I love you too. The words hung between us like promises, scary and wonderful and completely true. Help me organize these boxes? Adeline asked, gesturing at stacks of photo albums covering her studio floor. My aunt finally cleared out Dad's storage unit. I settled cross-legged beside her, coffee warming my hands as we sorted through decades of family memories. Most albums contained standard family photos, holidays, graduations, birthday parties, but one leather-bound book caught my attention. Wedding album, she said, opening to reveal 1970s fashions and earnest young faces. I nearly dropped my coffee cup. There, standing beside the groom in a powder blue tuxedo, was my father. 25 years younger, hair still dark, but unmistakably him. He had his arm around Adeline's father, both men grinning with the easy confidence of lifelong friendship. That's my dad, I whispered, pointing at the best man. Adeline went very still. What? Robert Bryant. That's definitely him. We stared at the photograph like it might explain itself. Our fathers, young and happy, celebrating what looked like the closest of friendships. The wedding party photos showed them laughing together, raising glasses, sharing some private joke that excluded everyone else. This makes no sense, Adeline said slowly. My family never mentioned knowing any Bryants. I flipped through more pages, finding additional photos of our fathers together. Camping trips, business meetings, casual dinners with their wives. They looked inseparable, like brothers choosing each other across bloodlines. Look at this, I said, finding a photo of them standing in front of a storefront. The sign read Bryant Foster Photography Studio. They were business partners, Adeline breathed. Partners. The word carried new weight now. heavy with implications we couldn't yet understand. Why had neither family ever mentioned this connection? Why did our father's close friendship exist only in forgotten photographs? We need answers, I said, reaching for my phone. Wait. Adeline caught my hand. Maybe we should think about this first. But I was already dialing my mother's number, questions burning in my throat like acid. Mom, I need to ask you something strange. Did Dad ever have a business partner named Foster? The silence stretched so long I thought the call had dropped. Where did you hear that name? Mom's voice had gone cold and careful. Just answer me, please. Another pause. Your father doesn't discuss that period of his life. Neither should you. What happened between them? Kira, some things are better left buried. Trust me on this. She hung up before I could press further, leaving me staring at my phone in frustration. Adeline tried her aunt next, the family member most likely to share uncomfortable truths. Aunt Marie? I found some old photos of Dad with someone named Bryant. They had a business together? Even I could hear the sharp intake of breath through the phone. Where did you find those pictures? I thought we got rid of everything. What happened between them? Oh, honey, that's ancient history. Your father and Robert Bryant were thick as thieves until the partnership went bad. Very bad. Adeline put the call on speaker, her hand finding mine as her aunt continued. They started the photography studio right after college, had big dreams about becoming Virginia's premier wedding photographers. Worked together almost 10 years, building clientele, reputation, everything. So, what went wrong? Money, betrayal, the usual things that destroy friendships. Marie's voice carried old pain. Robert started stealing clients, setting up competing appointments, undermining your father's work. The final straw was the Henderson wedding. Biggest contract they'd ever landed. Robert showed up solo, claimed credit for everything, cut your father out completely. I felt sick. The man she was describing sounded nothing like the father who'd raised me with principles about fairness and loyalty. Dad sued for his share of the business, but Robert had been moving money, changing contracts, covering his tracks for months. Left your father with legal bills and a ruined reputation. When was this? Adeline asked quietly. 1995, maybe 96. Your father never recovered professionally. Had to start over from scratch. Moved the whole family to Newport News just to escape the scandal. After she hung up, we sat in heavy silence. The wedding photos spread around us like evidence of some crime we'd accidentally uncovered. My father's not like that, I said finally. There has to be more to the story. What if there isn't? Adeline's voice was small. What if we're the daughters of men who destroyed each other? The question hung between us like a blade, sharp enough to cut through everything we'd built together. Love suddenly felt complicated, dangerous, freighted with history we'd never chosen but couldn't escape. This doesn't change us, I said, but even I could hear the uncertainty in my voice. Doesn't it? Outside, autumn wind rattled the studio windows, and I wondered if some distances were too wide to bridge, even with love. 3 weeks passed like slow torture. We tried maintaining normalcy, meeting for coffee dates that felt forced, sharing creative work that seemed hollow. Every conversation carried the weight of our father's history, making intimacy feel like betrayal of family loyalty. This is ridiculous, Adeline said during a particularly stilted Tuesday coffee session. We're letting their past control our present. Are we? Or are we being realistic about complications we can't solve? She studied my face across the table, reading exhaustion and conflict I couldn't hide. When's the last time you wrote anything? I can't concentrate. Every time I try to focus on my characters, I think about our fathers, what they did to each other, what they allegedly did. Your aunt seemed pretty certain about the details. The doubt in my voice stung us both. We'd reached an impasse neither of us knew how to navigate. Two people who'd found perfect creative partnership now struggling through conversations like strangers. My mother's unexpected visit that Friday evening complicated everything further. She arrived without warning, suitcase in hand and determination in her eyes. I came to check on your progress, she said, surveying my apartment like a battlefield inspector. Your editor called asking about deadline extensions. I hit a rough patch. It happens. This isn't about writing, is it? This is about that woman you've been seeing. The accusation hung between us, loaded with assumptions I wasn't ready to address. Mom had always possessed radar for my relationships, but she'd never confronted me this directly. Adeline's a friend. We share creative interests. Don't insult my intelligence, Kira. I've seen how you light up when you mention her name. Before I could respond, my doorbell rang. Adeline stood on the threshold with takeout containers and wine, clearly planning an evening together. She took one look at my mother's stern expression and understood immediately. Mrs. Bryant. I didn't know you were visiting. Ms. Foster. Mom's voice could have frozen the Chesapeake. How convenient. The dinner that followed felt like diplomatic negotiations between hostile nations. Mom questioned Adeline about her photography career, her family background, her intentions regarding my writing schedule. Each inquiry carried subtext about worthiness and interference. Your father was quite the photographer, Mom said during dessert, her tone casual but eyes sharp. Back in his partnership days. Adeline went very still. You know about that? I know my husband was betrayed by someone he trusted completely. Someone who destroyed his business and reputation for personal gain. That's not the story I heard. I'm sure it isn't. The temperature in the room dropped 20 degrees. I watched two women I cared about size each other up like warriors preparing for battle. Neither willing to back down from defending their family's version of history. Maybe we should discuss this later, I suggested weakly. No, Mom said firmly. If you're involved with this family, you need to understand what kind of people they are. Excuse me? Adeline's photographer's composure cracked. What kind of people? The kind who steal opportunities from friends, who lie and manipulate and destroy lives without conscience. Adeline stood abruptly, wine glass trembling in her grip. That's rich. Coming from the wife of the man who embezzled partnership funds and disappeared in the middle of the night. The accusation hit like thunder. Mom's face went white, then red with fury. How dare you repeat such lies in my presence? They're not lies. My father has the documentation to prove it. Your father is a liar and a cheat, just like his daughter apparently. The insult shattered whatever remained of civilized discourse. Both women were on their feet now. Years of buried resentment exploding into open hostility. Stop, I shouted, standing between them. This is insane. You're fighting about something that happened 30 years ago. Some betrayals don't have expiration dates, Mom said coldly. After she stormed out, Adeline and I stood in my wrecked living room. The evening's casualties scattered around us like broken glass. I should go, she said quietly. Don't, please. Your mother's right about one thing. This is complicated beyond what either of us signed up for. She gathered her things with efficient movements that felt like walls going up between us. At the door, she paused without turning around. Maybe we need time to figure out if love is enough to bridge this kind of history. Adeline, wait. But she was already gone, leaving me alone with wine-stained tablecloths and the echoes of accusations I didn't understand well enough to defend against. The silence in my apartment felt complete and devastating, like the end of something I'd barely begun to treasure. 3 weeks without Adeline felt like living underwater, everything muffled, distorted, barely breathable. My manuscript sat untouched while I watched rain streak my apartment windows and counted coffee cups like prayer beads. The cycling club rides continued without me, my bike gathering dust like an abandoned promise. Sleep became elusive, interrupted by dreams where our fathers argued in black and white while Adeline and I stood frozen in opposite corners, unable to reach each other across generations of misunderstanding. You look like hell, my editor said during our video call. What's happening with the deadline? I need another month, maybe 2. Kira, this isn't like you. Talk to me. But how do you explain that love and family loyalty had collided, like freight trains, leaving wreckage I couldn't navigate around? How do you admit that creative partnership had become casualty to inherited grudges? Personal complications. I'll figure it out. The cycling club's autumn century ride approached like Judgment Day, 100 miles through Virginia countryside that would either torture me with memories or provide escape from my self-imposed exile. I debated participation obsessively, knowing Adeline would be there with her camera equipment, documenting other people's adventures while we avoided each other like opposing magnets. Saturday morning found me at the starting line despite every rational instinct screaming retreat. Tom looked surprised, but pleased to see me back, accepting my explanation about needing solitude and endurance challenges without probing deeper. Stick with the middle group, he advised. Don't try to be heroic. But heroism wasn't the goal. Survival was. Mile 30 brought the first glimpse of blonde hair and familiar cycling form ahead in the lead group. My heart performed gymnastics that had nothing to do with physical exertion, and I forced myself to maintain distance, savoring the sight of her while protecting both of us from awkward encounters. Mile 60 delivered different torture. The middle group had thinned, leaving me riding solo through farmland that looked exactly like our photography expedition locations. Every barn, every fence line, every play of light through autumn leaves reminded me of watching her work, of learning to see beauty through her artistic vision. The Great Bridge Lock appeared ahead, mandatory rest stop and refueling station. I'd hoped to grab snacks quickly and continue, avoiding prolonged contact with other riders who might ask uncomfortable questions about my absence. Instead, I found Adeline sitting alone on a bench beside the water, camera equipment untouched in her lap. She looked as exhausted as I felt, shadows under blue eyes that spoke of sleepless nights matching my own. Kira. Her voice carried surprise, and something else. Relief, maybe. I didn't expect to see you here. Mechanical issues. Chain dropped, took forever to fix. We both knew she could repair bike problems faster than most shop mechanics. This was an excuse, a reason to separate from the group and sit alone with thoughts that mirrored my own. How's the writing? She asked. Non-existent. You? Same. Can't focus on anything. Silence stretched between us, filled with everything we weren't saying. Other riders passed, calling greetings that felt like intrusions on this fragile moment of reconnection. This is stupid, I said finally. We're destroying ourselves over something that happened before we were born. Is it stupid? Or are we protecting our families from further damage? What if we're the ones being damaged now? She looked at me then, really looked, and I saw my own pain reflected in her expression. 3 weeks of separation had solved nothing except proving how much we needed each other. I miss you, she whispered. I miss you too. Every damn day. The confession cracked something open between us. Before rational thought could interfere, I was standing, moving toward her bench. She met me halfway, and suddenly we were holding each other beside the lock, cyclists passing around us like water around stones. This is crazy, she murmured against my shoulder. Everything worthwhile is. When she kissed me, it tasted like coming home after a long exile. Desperate, needed, full of 3 weeks' worth of suppressed longing. Her hands found familiar places on my body, and I remembered why I'd been willing to risk family disapproval for this connection. Come home with me, she said against my lips. The ride isn't finished. It is for us. We loaded our bikes into her Jeep with trembling hands, need overriding every rational consideration about pace and distance. The drive to her studio passed in charged silence, anticipation building like storm pressure. Inside, months of creative and romantic partnership exploded into desperate physical connection. We made love with the intensity of people who'd nearly lost each other, bodies remembering what minds had tried to forget. Later, tangled together on her couch, we talked in whispers about love and loyalty, and the courage required to choose happiness over inherited conflict. We can't keep doing this, she said, tracing patterns on my skin, starting and stopping, letting fear control us. What's the alternative? We figure it out together. Research the truth, not just family versions of it. And if the truth makes things worse, then at least we'll know what we're really fighting. The autumn light fading through her studio windows felt like possibility, like maybe love really could bridge the distance between past and present. The Chesapeake Public Library has newspaper archives going back to 1960, Adeline said, spreading research materials across my kitchen table. If we're doing this, we do it properly. We'd spent the previous night planning our investigation like detectives, mapping out sources and timelines. The decision to uncover the truth felt simultaneously terrifying and liberating. Finally taking control instead of letting family narratives control us. The microfilm machine hummed as we scrolled through 1995 editions of the local business journal, Pages of dry corporate news blurred past until we found what we were looking for. Bryant Foster photography studio dispute heads to court. Here, I said, stopping the feed. The article was brief but revealing. Robert Bryant had filed suit against Thomas Foster for breach of partnership agreement and financial impropriety. Foster had countersued, claiming theft of intellectual property and client manipulation. Both men painted pictures of betrayal that seemed impossible to reconcile. Look at this. Adeline pointed to a follow-up article dated 6 months later. Suit dropped by mutual agreement. No financial settlement disclosed. That's strange. Why would they both just walk away? We found more pieces in the business directory archives. Advertisements for competing photography studios. Both men struggling to rebuild their reputations independently. But the real breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Virginia Business Ethics Commission, the librarians suggested when we explained our search. They investigated several photography studios in the mid-90s for bid manipulation. The commission files painted a different picture entirely. Bryant Foster Photography had been caught in a web of corruption involving a rival studio called Premier Portraits. The owner, Marcus Webb, had systematically set up competing photography businesses to fail by spreading false information, stealing clients through industrial espionage, and manipulating vendor relationships. Dear Lord, Adeline breathed, reading the investigative summary. Webb targeted successful partnerships specifically. Divide and conquer. The documentation showed how Webb had approached both our fathers separately, feeding each man carefully crafted lies about the other's business dealings. He'd created false invoices, forged client communications, even hired actors to pose as dissatisfied customers. Your father thought mine was stealing clients because Webb provided fake evidence, I said, pieces falling into place. Mine thought yours was embezzling because Webb planted doctored financial records. They were both victims. The final revelation came in Webb's deposition testimony. He admitted orchestrating the entire scheme to eliminate Bryant Foster as competition for Premier Portraits' upcoming expansion into the Richmond market. He destroyed their friendship for market share, Adeline said quietly. 20-year partnerships sacrificed for his business plan. Armed with this information, we faced our most challenging task, convincing our fathers to hear the truth after 30 years of believing lies. Neutral territory, I suggested. Somewhere neither of them has emotional investment. The coffee shop where I'd first seen the cycling club flyer felt appropriately ironic for family reconciliation attempts. We'd called both fathers without revealing the other's involvement, simply requesting important conversations about family history. Dad arrived first, looking older than I remembered, and suspicious about my secretive phone call. His expression shifted to stone when Adeline entered with her father behind her. What is this? Dad demanded. An ambush, Thomas Foster replied coldly. Please sit, I said. Both of you. The tension around our corner table could have powered the entire coffee shop. Both men sat reluctantly, separated by decades of resentment and whatever stubborn pride had prevented reconciliation attempts. We found something, Adeline said, placing the commission files between them. About Marcus Webb and Premier Portraits. Ancient history, Dad muttered. History that explains everything. For the next hour, we walked them through Webb's documented deception, showing how systematically he'd manipulated their partnership toward destruction. The evidence was overwhelming. Invoices they'd never seen, client testimonials they'd never received, financial discrepancies they'd never authorized. This can't be right, Thomas said, studying a forged invoice. This signature isn't mine. Webb admitted to hiring a document specialist, Adeline explained. He needed believable evidence to convince each of you the other was stealing. Dad examined the false client complaints, his expression shifting from skepticism toward something approaching recognition. I never understood how you could change so completely, he said quietly to Thomas. 30 years we'd been friends, and suddenly you were sabotaging everything we'd built. I felt the same way. You were like a brother until suddenly you weren't. The admission broke something open between them. Years of buried pain and bewilderment spilled across the coffee shop table as they compared Webb's manipulations, realizing how perfectly they'd been played against each other. We were idiots, Thomas said finally. Proud idiots, Dad agreed. The reconciliation didn't happen immediately. Too much damage for Instant forgiveness, but acknowledgement began the healing process. They agreed to meet again, to continue sorting through layers of deception and misunderstanding that had cost them both so much. "Why did you girls care enough to dig this up?" Thomas asked as we prepared to leave. Adeline's hand found mine across the table, a public declaration that felt simultaneously terrifying and absolutely right. "Because some things are worth fighting for," she said simply. Dad studied our joined hands with an expression I couldn't read. 30 years of protective instincts warring with obvious love for my happiness. "I see," he said quietly. "I suppose they are." 6 months later, sunlight streamed through the gallery windows of Chesapeake Arts Center as I adjusted my tie for the third time. Today marked 2 milestones I'd never imagined celebrating simultaneously: the launch of my completed novel and Adeline's first solo photography exhibition. "Stop fidgeting," she said, appearing beside me with that photographer's grace that still made my heart skip. "You look perfect." Her exhibition filled 3 rooms with stunning Virginia landscapes, each image capturing the disappearing beauty she dedicated herself to documenting. The centerpiece featured our cycling adventures, black and white photographs that told the story of 2 women finding each other against impossible odds. "The great Chesapeake novel has arrived," my editor announced, holding up advance copies hot from the printer. The book felt substantial in my hands. Months of struggle transformed into something tangible and real. 3 women connected by a house that held their secrets, their choices, their courage to love authentically despite family expectations. The story had found its voice after all. Our fathers approached together, and sight that still amazed me after months of cautious reconciliation. The process hadn't been easy. 30 years of resentment required patience and compromise, but they did rebuild their friendship through weekly coffee meetings and shared grandchildren fantasies. "I'm proud of you both," Dad said, examining Adeline's photographs with genuine appreciation. "These capture something essential about Virginia." "Your novel does the same thing with words," Thomas added, reading the dust jacket copy. "Art runs in both families, apparently." The cycling club arrived en masse, Tom leading the charge toward the wine table with characteristic enthusiasm. Mike praised our excellent partnership, Sarah asked pointed questions about wedding plans, and the entire group made themselves at home among the photographs. "Speech time," Adeline announced, tapping her wine glass. I surveyed the crowd. Family, friends, fellow artists, cycling companions who'd become chosen family. 6 months ago, love had seemed impossible, blocked by inherited conflicts and family loyalty. Tonight, everything felt possible. "A year ago, I was stuck," I began. "Creatively, personally, spiritually. Then I met someone who changed everything by teaching me to see beauty in unexpected places." Adeline's eyes met mine across the room, that familiar spark still igniting between us after months of partnership. "They say love conquers all, but that's not quite right. Love gives us courage to conquer what needs conquering. Fear, prejudice, the weight of other people's mistakes. Love doesn't solve problems. It makes us brave enough to solve them ourselves." Applause filled the gallery, but I only heard Adeline's hands clapping, only saw her face glowing with pride and affection that had grown deeper through shared challenges. Later, after the crowd dispersed and equipment was packed away, we stood alone in my empty apartment surrounded by moving boxes. Tomorrow we'd complete the move to our shared studio space downtown, her darkroom. Adjoining my writing office, creative partnership officially formalized. "Ready for this?" she asked, gesturing at the chaos of combined lives. Terrified and excited. Best kind of ready. She pulled me close, and I marveled again at how perfectly we fit together. How natural this still felt after months of choosing each other daily. "I love you, Kira Bryant Foster," she whispered against my neck. The hyphenated name was still new, wedding rings catching lamplight as she traced patterns on my skin. We'd married quietly last month, families finally united in support of something beautiful emerging from old pain. "I love you too, Adeline Bryant Foster." Outside, autumn wind rattled windows, but inside felt perfectly warm and safe. Next weekend, we joined the cycling club for their annual Mountain Century ride, cameras and notebooks ready to document new adventures. The great Chesapeake novel was finding its audience, Her Virginia landscapes were gaining gallery attention, and together we were writing the next chapter of a story that began with broken chains and coffee shop flyers. "What's next for us?" I asked. "Everything," she said simply. "Absolutely everything." The future stretched ahead like an open road, challenging and beautiful and completely ours to navigate together. Some distances could be bridged after all, with patience and courage, and love strong enough to span generations of misunderstanding. We'd finally learned the most important truth. Some partnerships are worth fighting for, no matter how impossible they seem at first glance.